It's extraordinarily rare that Jimmy and I are at a loss for words, but here we are, and we're going to have to find some way to talk about this.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson and me, Jimmy Stein. That's him. Jimmy, how are you today?
I'm all right. You know, we recorded a show yesterday, and just our normal regular show that we would record on a Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, I guess it was. And I never would have guessed we'd be back here 24 hours later talking about this.
No, and of course, we're talking about the Darius Miles situation. For those who don't know, if you're listening to this podcast, surely to God, you know. You got to know something. I mean, it was on the Today Show today. First of all, Jim, before I get into all that, want to thank everybody for making us your first listen. We do appreciate it. I felt a little guilty for not putting out a video after we heard the news, but I really wanted to wait till some more news came in, because here's the first thing. The headline is Darius Miles arrested and charged with capital murder. And everybody's like, oh, my God. It's so hard to even read the story after the headline because the headline seems to tell you everything, right? I mean, as my phone goes off again, I'm sorry, in the most inappropriate time ever, as always. Anyway, yeah, I mean, the headline seems to The headline is made in such a way that you immediately want to text people without even reading the body of the story. And that's, again, it is what it is. I'm not blaming the headline. It is what it is. But a few things we don't know. In fact, we pretty much believe Darius Miles was not the shooter. We don't know exactly whose gun it was, what the situation was, what happened. We do know there was a beautiful 23-year-old woman who lost her life. That's a shame. That's a mother. And it's awful. And Darius Miles was somehow connected to all this, maybe just by being there and being in the car. That is all we really know. I have seen every rumor under the sun that involves other basketball players that, you know, were they there? Were they not there? Was it one of their guns? Was it one of their girlfriends? I've seen all these just like y'all have. We don't know if any of that is remotely true. I did see a report on a moderately credible news source that two other players, Miller and Bradley, were interviewed and released. I would consider that to be good news under the circumstances, because if you are going to be interviewed, the best thing that can happen is you're released, right? I mean, you're the law talking guy. You tell me.
Okay. My vast legal experience in law school and then practicing law, I agree. Being interviewed and then released is way better than being interviewed and being held. So agreed.
Exactly. Okay. But my point is, some people are like,
technically speaking, yes.
Some people will be like, well, why were they interviewed? That's awful. And I'm like, look, here's the deal. If you're going to be interviewed, you got to start looking at it like, okay, if I'm going to be there, I'd rather, if I'm going to be in the vicinity of this, I don't want to be interviewed. But I'm going to be interviewed. If I'm going to be interviewed, what's my best case scenario? Just being released. That's the best case scenario. Here's the other thing that somebody told me that is so true. They said, what's the real sad part of this? And I'm not going to make a social commentary, don't get me wrong, to distract you from what happened here. I don't want to do that. Darius Miles was somehow involved in this, at least to the extent that he was in the presence of somebody who shot somebody else. That's all we know, and that happened. So I'm not trying to escape that. But here is something that was brought to my attention that can be used every time something like this happens to one of your favorite players. If this didn't involve an Alabama basketball player, guess what? Nobody'd be talking about it. And that's a sad statement. It's true. And I don't want to get it I don't want to get it twisted in that I'm trying to distract you from the Alabama basketball part. I don't want it to seem like I'm being a homer here. I've also seen on Twitter the best of humanity and, of course, the worst of humanity. I should call out some of these people. There's one particular Auburn fan who does not he does not represent all Auburn fans. He was making some really horrific statements about this and how it reflects on the basketball program in Tuscaloosa and Nate Oates and all these other things. And all I could think was, man, you got to be a sorry human being to go off on to use this as a platform to go off about a basketball program, because that's not it at all. And here's the other thing. We're going to talk about how this affects the basketball program in the next segment. But if you had told me, first of all, I would have a hard time believing anybody on this basketball team would even be around a situation like this. I would have a hard time believing it.
Right.
I could believe it on some other programs and other teams in Alabama's past. Football, baseball, basketball, whatever. I could believe it with some of the guys that I've seen just by body language and what little I know about some things that they've done in the past. Not this particular team. But if you had said, okay, Luke, for sure, 100%, some guy on this basketball team was around a situation like this, Darius Miles would have been the last guys I would have brought up. Because if you just watch him on the court, not even when he's playing, like on the bench, whatever, he is aloof. He is he's fun. He's dancing. He's sort of like teaming it up with the team. You know, he's doing all these.
He's known as the team. He's known as the team comedian. I mean, in terms of like the personalities on the team, and if you ask everybody on the team about who does, I mean, he's the team comedian.
Now, let me also add, I probably would have said that at the beginning of the year. Now that we've gone half the year and Darius Miles was away from the team for a little bit, for what Nate Oates said, honestly, this is not an injury. He had some personal issues. As a guy who knows a little bit about has been around some mental health stuff, I know now when you say that, that's not a joke thing. That's not like he's sad or he's mad about something. No, he's probably dealing with some things. And you don't know what direction this is going to take. So now I might have changed my opinion on it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he's a bad person. It just means he is probably dealing with some things mentally that are – and don't we all, again – some people are going to mistake that as, Luke, you're taking up for Darius Miles being in this situation. He shouldn't have been in this situation ever. That is beside the point. But Jimmy, in the end, this is just an awful situation. There is no winner. There is no prize. This is sad every which way. There are multiple victims here. Some lost their life. Some are going to lose quality of life forever. And it's just awful. Do you have anything else to add before we take a break and talk about how this affects the team in the next segment?
Not really. I would just warn against or just urge everyone not to engage in a lot of public speculation until we know more facts. Coach Oates is going to talk to the media today. Luke and I are recording this on Monday morning, and Coach Oates may have already spoken by the time y'all listen to this. I think it's supposed to be at noon today. If there's dramatic new news, Luke and I may do another show later this afternoon. If there is, and again, there's always multiple tragedies when something like this happens. The real one is the young lady who lost her life, and that poor and the 5-year-old kid who lost his mother. That is the tragedy. Second is Darius proving to all students, not all, I was going to say athletes, all the students at Alabama, it's a good lesson that you can be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And frankly, sometimes you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you're part of the reason. You are part of the reason it's the wrong place at the wrong time. And why can't everyone throw water on a fire? And what I worry is there was a little bit of a fire, and somehow gasoline got thrown on it, and now lives are changed.
Here's the thing, too, especially on social media. Like, people can't separate. You can feel sorry for Darius Miles, at the same time not absolve him of guilt.
Correct.
And people are having a hard time doing that on social media. They're like, well, that punk should have known better than to be around a guy that would blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you something, buddy. You don't know what some of your friends are capable of. Some of your family members are capable of. So even if you aren't the shooter, which it may come out later, his attorney has come out and said, hey, I can't wait to have my day in court. I profess my innocence. You just don't know. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm supposed to put a live read in right now. I'm not going to do it out of respect for the moment and respect for this sponsor, because it's kind of hard to go from what we're talking about to a live read. So I'm not going to do that. We're just going to take 2 quick commercial breaks. We'll be back. We'll talk about the effect of this on the team. All right. I hope people understand, especially our bosses, that why I didn't want to put a live read right there. I was just looking at this and going, I don't know that I should read that right now. And I think it would be a bad segue. So, all right. How does this affect the team? Playing wise, it's not an effect. I mean, no disrespect to Darius Miles, but he was a non-factor on this team.
He was already announced out for the season, and I don't know. I saw him jumping around at the game Saturday. I'm not so sure he was out for the rest of the season with an ankle injury. And I think we now know that Darius is just dealing with a lot of issues, but he wasn't going to play the rest of the season anyway. His absence means nothing in terms of how the season was going to play out. But now his absence may mean a lot because of we all know what's happened.
And, things like this can galvanize a team. They can rip a team apart. The problem I have is, one thing we have bragged on in this podcast about this basketball team is the chemistry, the cohesiveness, how together they seem to play. Now, they've done all that without Darius Miles, okay? They did all that in the summer without Darius Miles. I mean, now he may have been involved to a degree, but he hadn't been playing much. And so if you aren't playing as much, you also aren't going to practice as much, meaning you're not going to factor in the practice as much too. So again, I'm not worried about that aspect. I am worried about the mental aspect of this. I'm also mildly worried about, okay, was anybody else at the scene? We don't know. I've seen the rumors. I'm not going to spread any of them. But was anybody else there? And if they were, what kind of fallout is there from that? What if, again, I'm not going to use any names, and it's going to feel like I'm using names when I say this, but what if some of the players or one of the players or any of the players that were there has an NBA future? Would it not stand to reason that maybe, even if there's no involvement, it was just like, oh my God, I can't believe this has happened. I'm here in the moment. It's surreal. Maybe his family, maybe his advisors say, you know what, maybe the best thing for you to do is to take a break from basketball, period. I'm not trying to spread anything to happen. I'm just saying I'm worried about how all this is going to play out. Now, let's all assume that no other basketball players were even in the vicinity, were witness or whatever. So we play Vanderbilt tomorrow night at 7:30 at a place that has been a hellhole for us. It's arguably a hellhole for everybody, just in the sense that you have to play in it, and it is not a great place to. Benches are at the opposite ends of the goals. When you go, if you go out of bounds enough, you go into a pit, an orchestra pit. And it's just not a great place to play basketball. I've been there a few times. I just don't enjoy. I don't enjoy that place. They need a new arena as bad as we do. And so Vanderbilt's also a team that put up 63 points in the second half against Arkansas. So they're going to be running and gunning and having fun and full of themselves. They beat Arkansas. They're beginning to get on track a little bit. And here we are, the hottest team in the country. I think that's undeniable. And the brakes have been put on in a violent way. So how does the team react to this? Do they become more organized, or do we really see some cracks on Tuesday night, Jimmy?
I think it's the biggest challenge maybe of Nate Oates' entire career, going all the way back to his days in Duluth at Romulus, and then in Buffalo, and now in Tuscaloosa. I think this is the biggest challenge of his career, is dealing with this and not letting the on the court stuff be affected by the off the court stuff. These are young kids who can be easily affected when their friend through, and what they've all been witness to. And by that, I mean, they've all been a witness to Darius's career and his time at Alabama. And now their friend is sitting in jail, very possibly for his entire life or worse. So how Nate Oates is able to navigate this, and we don't want to speculate, like Lou said, we don't want to speculate on whether other players were involved and whether they have to be punished. If so, but we don't want to speculate on that until we know more. But the point is, this would be really difficult to handle, period, just with the facts we already know. And then, we talk about schedule luck, Luke. We can talk about that term all the time, schedule luck. Some of it is who was on the schedule. That's some of it. But this is another big part of schedule luck to me, is when you play teams. For instance, Vanderbilt, like a month ago, was and playing at Nashville, I wouldn't have even raised an eyebrow because they were playing so bad. Now they're playing great. The very last half of basketball they played was the best they've played the entire season. So we're catching Vanderbilt coming off of their best half of the whole year. And then with the news of what happened in Tuscaloosa, you combine those two things, and the schedule luck here is pretty horrible in terms of, especially we're just catching Vanderbilt at the worst possible time to play them. So Alabama did lose I think they lost to Vanderbilt last year. Didn't they lose down the stretch because Pippen shot like 97 free throws? And so I think we lose to Vanderbilt last year. So a little bit of a revenge game here. And, and it is a difficult place to play. So you throw all that in. I'm curious.
Is it a revenge game? Do you have revenge games in basketball? I don't think you do.
We should. We should. If we
but
don't,
I don't
we
think
should.
you do. Okay.
Well, for one thing,
the only way you have a revenge game in basketball is if somebody like beats you for national championship or beats you to get in the four or something. I don't think you're a revenge game in basketball because there's so many games. I mean, you can have a rivalry, but you're not going to have a revenge game, I don't think.
I'm saying we lost to these guys last time we played. I'm sure that's going to come up that, hey, we lost this building last year. So it is a new roster. Pippen's not even a player for them anymore. We have a new roster. So I doubt that's a huge factor, but it's a good point about how, you can lose in Nashville. Trust me, we did it less than a year ago. So you can lose this game. And with everything going on, I'm going to be very impressed. We bragged about this team's mental toughness. To say it's put to the test is something. And here's what's really important, Luke. If the team is in a funk, if the team is in a mental funk and they can't play well, it's understandable, but you can't let that turn into a slide, right? Yeah. I mean, that's what you want to do. This can't turn into a slide. Alabama's just accomplished so much, and it will be such a shame that this off-court tragedy starts a slide that is irrecoverable.
I do now want to tell everybody about Built Bar. You're looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all the fat and calories, well, you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is to lose some weight. I do this by eating some Built Bars for lunch or for breakfast or even dinner sometimes. Built Bar are unbelievable filling. They taste delicious. They will certainly satisfy you like other particular chocolatey kind of bar, but that isn't as good for you. I don't want to steal their thunder nor give them any free press because they don't advertise with us. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate, not screwing around with some of this fake chocolate, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter, brownie, coconut, almond. All these things are absolutely delicious. And now you can also get them at Walmart. You can also get them at Sam's Club. or you can get them at built.com, which is where we've always said go get them at built.com. Go check out.com. But if you're in Walmart and you're like, hey, I really need something nutritious, and I'm listening to this awesome podcast, and they're telling me about this chocolatey treat that's absolutely delicious, well, then just mosey on over to the nutrition aisle. It's over there by the pharmacy. I know exactly where it is. And go get you some Built bars. You can get you a bunch of them. You can get you a few. You want to get just one and try it out, you'll be hooked. I'm telling you, go to Built and check out all their other flavors. They got them all there at built.com. Go to built.com. You'll absolutely love it. You can't beat them. Can't beat them with a stick. And it's built.com. That's all I need to say. Also want to tell everybody thank y'all for checking us out again. Also want to encourage you to check out Locked On College Basketball. This is a great podcast. It's a lot more fun now if you're an Alabama fan and we're doing this. So go check out Locked On College Basketball. That's what the Locked In Network does, is it finds a niche and uses it or niche. Would you prefer niche? Okay, whatever.
I'm going niche.
I know. I'm going with niche because niche makes me sound like such an uppity jerk. I wouldn't listen to a podcast who said, this is my niche. I'd be like, no, you already proved you're not my niche.
Have you listened to that cool podcast with Jimmy and that guy from France?
I'd be like, shut up, niche. Anyway, go check out Locked On College Basketball. All right, Jimmy, let's talk a little bit about some coordinator stuff. And what might have been the funniest thing that happened last night, it wasn't a lot funny that happened last night because the Darius Miles news was dominating. But we're on a text chain, and somebody sent us a picture, a fuzzy, grainy picture of Nick Saban speaking to somebody in a restaurant who happened to be bald-headed. And all we could do was try to put our collective brains together and try to figure out who this was. And it turned out, I won't even say who it was. I mean, you can if you want to. But it turned out to not be any defensive coordinator candidate. Everybody assumed it was. It wasn't Jeremy Pruitt. He thought it was Jeremy Pruitt. And then somebody looked a little closer. I guess they just magnified it so much that eventually you got the right pixels. And they were like, yeah, this isn't Jeremy Pruitt. This is just some other bald-headed dude. And so that is where we are in trying to figure out what Nick can do with this defensive coordinator thing. And look, I'm pro Jeremy Pruitt. I've said before, and I don't mean this as an insult at Hugh Freeze or Auburn, but if Hugh Freeze is hireable, Jeremy Pruitt is hireable. I really believe that. Just hire him. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. Rules are done. It's over. So just hire him. Yeah, I mean, he probably did some of that McDonald's stuff. I freely admit it, but it doesn't matter anymore.
Well, that's not that's somewhat my opinion. I do think that it's the ongoing NCAA investigation is an obstacle. I think it's up to Alabama's lawyers and Alabama's compliance team and Alabama's athletic department to figure out what those obstacles are. And really, it's a case of it's almost simple. It's almost as simple as you talk to someone at the NCAA, their lawyers, their legal team, and basically what you're going over is a worst case scenario. Hey, if we hire this guy, what's the worst thing that can happen to Alabama by hiring this guy? And then you make a decision from there. Maybe it's something you can easily live with or somewhat easily live with. Or maybe you get information that's like, we just can't do this because the worst case scenario is just too bad. So I don't know the substance of those conversations. I just know this, and I mean this as a compliment to Coach Pruitt, is if this wasn't out there, if this barrier, this obstacle wasn't out there, this would have been over. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, had Coach Pruitt left Tennessee with no NCAA cloud, he had just been let go for not winning enough games. I think he would have be our defensive coordinator today, because he would have been our defensive coordinator in 2021, in 2022. You know, these past 2 years that Heupel's been at Tennessee, I think Coach Pruitt would have gone immediately to Tuscaloosa and been the Pete Golding. I believe that. So I think the only thing keeping Coach Pruitt out of the defensive coordinator position today at Alabama is that obstacle, and it's being determined how tall the obstacle is. And if it's determined that it is too tall, then there are other really intriguing candidates like Glenn Schumann, like Jim Leonard, But as we record this on a Monday morning, and I may get information that changes this, but as of Monday morning, I suspect that our defensive coordinator will be one of those three people. And I think all three are home runs. Jeremy Pruitt, Glenn Schumann, Jim Leonard, all three home runs. My personal preference is Jeremy because we know him. He's one of us. We know what kind of defensive coordinator he is. He has experience in the system. I want it to be Coach Pruitt, but we also need to know what the ramifications of hiring him are.
Well, and also he's a great recruiter.
Yes.
I mean, super recruiter. So yeah, I'm for it too. Again, it feels weird because I do know about the allegations. I know about all that, and I'd be fine with the other two guys too. I was listening to a replay of College XM, whatever College XM station it is, because I leave for work about 5 a.m. And so the replay had an interview with Tom Luganbill and whatever talking head he happened to be with, and Chuck Oliver from 680 The Fan in Atlanta. And Chuck Oliver was about how far Georgia is ahead of Alabama and everybody else, but specifically Alabama. He talked about how Kirby Smart has essentially, locked the door and made it so there is no pathway to catch Georgia and blah, blah, blah. And how, Nick Saban is certainly fallen off somewhat. Kept thinking, I get it. I get why an outsider might think that. Like an outsider random fan might say, Alabama lost 2 games this year and didn't even go to the playoffs. Again, I want to remind everybody, we did lose those 2 games on the last play of the game. And both of those games on the road were tougher than just about any game Georgia played, almost including the playoffs outside of Ohio State.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I mean, Tennessee, as good as they were, and again, Georgia certainly earned that national championship.
They did.
They didn't beat Tennessee in Knoxville. They beat Tennessee at home. They didn't have to play LSU in Baton Rouge. They played LSU in a neutral setting. Had Alabama, all the evidence in the world, Luke, suggests that had Alabama played Tennessee and LSU at home or in neutral sites, Alabama would have won the game. Don't we normally say, well, when you're on the road, they're getting 3 points from Vegas. Well, give Alabama 3 points, and they win both games. So, I'm not trying to take anything away from Georgia or being fictional about my favorite team, but whenever anybody says Georgia's way ahead of Alabama, I'm like, don't the head-to-head Georgia to Alabama games count?
They just don't count for anything. And here's the other thing.
The only game Georgia won, Alabama led in the fourth quarter.
Jimmy, if everybody, I know this, an Alabama fan, has had no problem saying, hey, Georgia, y'all earned this title. You earned it. And, I mean, yeah, some people do throw in about, well, if Marvin Harrison hadn't gotten hurt and if J-Mo hadn't gotten hurt, I'm not going to even do that. You won it. Injuries are part of the game. You won it. You won it. You won it. Now, where I think we all take exception is when, and Chuck Oliver didn't come out and say this, but he sort of hinted this is what he wants you to do. All right, you said Georgia earned the title. Now say they're the best that you've ever seen. And say Stetson Bennett would beat Skeletor in a hand-to-hand combat by himself, even if Skeletor had stormtroopers backing him up. Just say it right now. And I'm like, I'm not saying that. They did well. They're not the best team ever, but they did really well. And can I just say they did well? I'm not the one who's trying to put an asterisk by anything. I'm just saying Georgia won the title. They deserve the rings. They deserve the fun. But quit trying to make me say that Alabama, forget anybody else, Alabama cannot catch up. Because we can. We're not even the race isn't even over.
They're so eager to get Alabama people to admit that the dynasty is over. That's what it's about. They want Alabama fans to say the dynasty is over and the dynasty is now Georgia. That there's this rush to do that. And maybe that's true. Maybe it is. Let's play a whole nother football season. And if Georgia wins the 3rd straight national championship and Alabama's not even in Atlanta, you might get me to start agreeing, but there has to be more than the evidence we have right now. There has to be more than that. And that's why I'm very eager about this upcoming season because I think Alabama and Nick Saban, they do have a lot to prove.
All right, buddy, that's going to do it for today's podcast. We will be back tomorrow, hopefully with some more news and clearing up the Darius Miles situation. We'll see. But until then, we'll see you guys tomorrow, and roll tide.
Roll Tide.